Zawolik News Network, where history happens.
Hello and welcome to ZNN. I am your host, Bob Goodman. Today's big idea is about the purpose of government. Last episode, government was seen from the point of view of an absolute monarch. Today, we'll be exploring the point of view of the Enlightenment philosophers. These ideas eventually go on to become the basis for our democracy. We enjoy today in a good old USA, USA, USA. Do you smell what the Bob is cooking? That smells freedom. And B.O. Yes, a little B.O. Forgot to put on my deodorant. Woo! That is not freedom.
Hey class, last we met, I asked you to consider the following scenario. Imagine that you and all the other students in your grade are going on a class trip to China. All the students board a plane, but your teachers have to take another flight. When you're flying over the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the plane's engines malfunction, and you crash on a deserted island. The pilot and crew parachuted out of the plane before it landed, but miraculously, all of the students survived. The island has enough food and fresh water on it for everyone, but after a week of waiting, it is clear that no one is going to come and rescue you. The lack of rules have created tension between your classmates, and you decided that a government is needed. To do this, we will address the following questions. Why do you need a government? What should the government do for you and your classmates? And what limits should there be on a government? In order to answer these questions, we will look into the points of view of each of the Enlightenment philosophers on government. Let us first ask the question, why do you need a government? According to Thomas Hobbes, the state of nature of man is one of chaos, and government is needed in order to keep order.
Freedom is good, but security is better. That's what Thomas Hobbes believed. He made his point by imagining what it would be like to live without government, laws, or society. In this state of nature, you could do whatever you wanted to, but anyone else could do whatever they wanted to you. You'd have plenty of freedom, but you'd live in constant fear. It would be grim. You wouldn't be able to trust anyone. Even the weakest could kill the strongest by stealth. It would be difficult to cooperate or even survive. Life, Hobbes claimed, would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Anyone would do whatever they could to avoid living like that. Hobbes suggested a way out. People in the state of nature could make a social contract to put a strong leader, a sovereign, or perhaps a government in power over them to keep the peace. Individuals would join together and hand over many of their freedoms, most of them in fact. But it would be worth it to gain security and escape the terror of the war of all against all. The state could then rule with an iron rod if necessary, or a light touch if not. That's what Hobbes thought, and it's his justification for having a strong sovereign or government with extensive powers over the people. The trouble is, what you end up with may be peace, but at the cost of a frighteningly powerful state.
Another Enlightenment philosopher, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, had also considered what Hobbes was saying. However, he didn't feel that people should be forced into a government. He discussed something known as the social contract theory, which he discusses in his writing. I regard the establishment of the political body as a real contract between the people and the chiefs chosen by them, a contract by which both parties bind themselves to observe the laws therein expressed, which form the ties of their union. From whatever side we approach our belief, we reach the same conclusion, that the social compact sets up among the citizens an equality of such a kind that they all bind themselves to observe the same conditions and should therefore all enjoy the same rights. According to this excerpt from the social contract, what do the people in the government agree to as part of the contract? Also, according to Rousseau, what is one advantage of the social contract?
While both philosophers describe the state of nature as a sort of beastly existence absent any morality, they disagree on some fundamentals. Rousseau sees the Hobbesian model as leading to despotism, in which people have no choice but to turn to a third party to secure basic needs. Consequently, they do not freely choose their leaders. Rousseau argues that rather than choosing leaders out of fear, people choose to give up some power and rights, at least so that citizens can be equal. Rousseau dictated that decisions ought to be made for the sake of everyone, instead of a few. This would require that people follow a rule of law that they would follow on their own anyway. For Rousseau, people are better without government, because society means unfreedom and oppression. Whether out of fear or for the sake of equality, the consent to be ruled is called the social contract. So, listeners, I ask, who has it right? Do people need to be kept in line, or should they remain free to do as they wish?
So what is Jean-Jacques Rousseau's point of view? What would he recommend for your deserted island government? The next question we should address for our scenario is, what should the government do for you and your classmates? John Locke had addressed the purpose of government with great authority, his ideas becoming the cornerstone of our democracy. His most well-known ideas: government should protect people's natural rights. That's the life, liberty, and property. He also believed government should be based on the consent of the governed. This means that the people who are the governed should give their permission or consent to the government, usually through voting. According to John Locke's 2 treatises of government, if man in the state of nature is free, if he's absolute lord of his own person and possessions, or things that he owns, why will he give up his freedom? Since every man is equal, and since most men do not concern themselves with equity and justice, the enjoyment of rights in the state of nature is unsafe and insecure. Rights in the state of nature are constantly exposed to the attack of others. Why will he put himself under the control of any person or institution? The obvious answer: hence each man joins in society with others to preserve his life, liberty, and property. What do you think Locke means by state of nature? According to John Locke, why would a person put himself under the control of any person or institution, like a government? What does Locke mean when he says, the enjoyment of rights in the state of nature is unsafe and insecure? Can you think of an example of this? What are 3 natural rights that Locke lists at the end of this excerpt? Also from his 2 treatises of government, as far as we have any light from history, we have reason to conclude that all peaceful beginnings of government have been laid in the consent of the people. According to Locke, what have all peaceful beginnings of government had in common? And why do you think that might lead to a more peaceful government?
Very important. His theory of politics had 3 parts: natural rights, consent of the people, and a moral obligation to rebel. You heard me right. Moral obligation to rebel. Excited yet? So the first part centers around the idea that when God created man, he endowed each of us with certain rights. Among these rights are life, liberty, and property, and they're very important. They're known as natural rights, rights that were naturally given. As long as you exist, you get these rights. They should never be denied to anybody. They should never be taken away by anybody. They're for keepsies. The right to life is the right to live, and live whatever life you want as long as it doesn't infringe on the right to life of others. That means you can dye your hair pink and listen to rock music all day. You can have a cat, or two, or whatever, and anything in between, just as long as you don't take any life away from anybody else. Sorry, Jason Voorhees. The right to liberty means no one has the right to imprison you against your will, unless you're sent to jail for being naughty. That means the world is your playground. You can explore nature in Europe and wherever you want, but if you break the law, your right to freedom is taken away, and you go to jail. Pretty fair. Now, the right to property seems a little out of place in this list, but really, the right to property is a combination of the right to life and liberty. What? Okay, I'll break it down. Bear with me. In this state of nature, men are free to do as they please, so long as they preserve peace and preserve mankind in general.
Today's big idea explored ideas that transform history in so many ways. I'll leave off with a few questions. What's the best nation in the world? Donation. What's the greatest city in the world? Generosity. What's the greatest government in the world? Democracy. This is Bob Goodman signing off, and that's the big idea.